Alright, back to Aristotle's metaphysics. Alpha 3. We have now established that philosophy is a study of causes, indeed, of the most fundamental, primary, and valuable causes. However, we still have not been told much about what it is to investigate a cause, let alone a primary cause. This is a topic which Aristotle has devoted a great deal of thought. His view is that to have any philosophical understanding of causation, it is necessary to accept a certain taxonomy of causes, which he has already presented in the Physics. There are four basic ways in which one thing can cause another. It can be its cause by providing the form that it realizes, by being the matter from which it is made, by being the source of the process that leads to its coming to be, or by being that for the sake of which a thing is produced. In any actual case of causal explanation, it is vital to distinguish these four kinds of causation. Modern philosophers have often been puzzled at the willingness of Aristotle to talk of four kinds of cause, and it may be simpler to regard Aristotle as attempting to isolate four fundamentally different ways in which things can be explained. In any case, he certainly thinks that all explanation, including philosophical explanation, must conform with his scheme, and very characteristically, he proceeds to show that earlier philosophical practice did in fact observe the distinction of kinds of explanation, and acknowledge the need for them all, although incoherently. This claim is supported by a historical sketch of earlier metaphysical thinking. Philosophers began naturally enough by looking for the material cause of the world, with various elements and combinations of elements being the preferred candidates. It became apparent, however, that no understanding of the material constitution of the world could account for the prescience in it of movement and change, and so philosophers began to seek for a causal explanation in terms of the source or sources of processes in the world. This produced problems, not least the crisis precipitated by the eclectic rejection of change as a whole. But in any case, even the finding of the motive cause of the world would not have been felt to be adequate. An explanation was also needed of the intrinsic value of the world. It was Anaxagoras, I hope that's how it's said, who pioneered the way to such an explanation by suggesting that the arrangement of the world must be a product of a supreme mind. In Aristotle's terms, this is to say that there must be some feature of the world for which it exists. It is a hallmark of Aristotle's philosophical outlook that he sees his work as continuous with that of his predecessors. Indeed, he sometimes seems to conceive his project as that of effecting a kind of grand synthesis of the divine strands of earlier scientific and metaphysical speculation. It is for this reason that all the major treatises provide a survey in at least some depth of the previous debate. As this chapter shows, Aristotle is inclusive, even the poets are reviewed, and on subjects on which the ordinary man has an opinion. His view is also presented. The doxographical survey in the metaphysics, however, is distinctive both for its length and for the fact that it detects a large-scale evolution in the discussion of the causes of the world from a simple-minded concentration on the material substance towards the higher and more elusive causality of form and purpose. Such a sense of development is intellectual history has become familiar enough in the 19th and 20th centuries, but was unusual in antiquity. And on the strength of it, Aristotle could be hailed, if not as the father, at least as the remote progenitor of what we call the history of ideas. Now, since it is clear that we must grasp knowledge of fundamental causes, for we say that each man has knowledge when we think that he knows the primary cause, and the causes are spoken of in four ways, of which one cause we say to be the substance and the essence. For the why is referred to as the extreme term, and the cause of principle is the primary why. And the second is the matter and substance. And the third is that form which comes the beginning of the change. And the fourth is the opposite cause to this, the wherefore, and the good. For this is the end of all coming into being and change. We have sufficiently theorized about them in the Physics 98.3b. Nevertheless, let us take those who have engaged in this consideration of the things that there are before us, and who have philosophized concerning truth. For it is clear that they too mention certain principles and causes, and as we go through them, there will be some advantages for our present method. Either we will discover some other kind of cause, or we will have greater confidence in those that we now state. Well, of the first philosophers, the majority thought that the causes in the form of matter were alone in the principles of all things, for that from which all entities come. From which each thing primarily arises, and into which it is the end resolved. It is at the end resolved. The substance remaining but changing as to its affections, this they announce to be the element and principle of all entities. And for this reason, they thought that nothing either came to be or was destroyed, since this sort of nature was always preserved. So that we do not even say that Socrates either came into being simpliciter when he became fine or musical, nor that he was destroyed when he lost those dispositions, since the substrate remained. Socrates himself, and the same consideration they thought applied to all other things, for they thought that there must be some nature, either one or more than one, from which other things arose while it was conserved. But the number and form of such a principle they do not all proclaim to be the same. Thales, the introducer of this sort of philosophy, said that it was water. That is why he declared the earth to be sitting on water, perhaps drawing a supposition from seeing that the nourishment of all creatures is moist, and that the warmth itself arises from this, and that is by this that all creatures live, and the assumption that the from which a thing comes is its principle in all causes. For this reason, indeed, taking this assumption, and also because the seeds of all creatures have a moist nature, and water is the natural principle for moist things, and there are also some who think that the very ancient thinkers, and those long before the present generation and the first to reason about the gods, made the same assumption about nature. And the first to reason about the gods made the same assumption about nature. For these poets made ocean and Tethys the parents of creation, and said that the oath of the gods was water, which they called Styx. For the assumption was that most ancient thing was the most worthy, and that an oath was the most worthy thing. That's in 98.4a. If then this opinion that nature happens to be primordial and ancient is perhaps unclear, yet Thales is said to have made these declarations concerning the primary cause. For Hippo, another great philosopher, one would not think right to include with those thinkers because of the triviality of his mind. They thought his mind was trivial. Anaximenes, however, assumed that the air was prior to water and was especially a principle of the simple bodies, and Diogenes thought the same, while Hippus of Mesopotamia and Heraclitus of Ephesus, oh man, I'm struggling with those, thought it was fire. Empedocles, Empedocles, thought that there were four elements, adding to those mentioned earth as a fourth, and for these things always remained and did not come into being except in frequency or rarity, being mixed together and separated into and out of one thing. Anaxagoras of Clazomenae, I don't know, Clazomenae, was earlier than he in date, but later in his work. And he said that the number of principles was infinite, for he said that the more or less of the homeomerous bodies, right? Yep, homeomerous bodies, such as water and fire, did come to be and perish in this way only, by mixing and discrimination, and that otherwise they did not come into being or perish, but remained eternally. From those thinkers, then, one might think that there is only a single cause, that said in the form of matter. But as they continued in this way, the facts themselves guided them and forced them to seek further. For even if, as much as you like, all coming to be and in destruction are from some simple thing or from several, why does this happen? And what is the cause? For indeed it cannot be that the substance itself forces itself to change. I mean that, for instance, neither wood nor bronze is the cause of either of them changing. Neither does wood make a bed or bronze a statue. But there is some other cause of the change. And to seek for this is to seek for the second kind of principle, as we would say, that from which comes the beginning of the change. Those then who right from the beginning grasped this method and asserted that the substance was a single and did not fall out with one another. But some of those who asserted a single principle, as though defeated by this inquiry, said that the single thing was unchanging, and so the whole of nature, not only in regard to generation and destruction, for this was ancient and agreed by everybody, but also in regard to every other kind of change, 98.4b. And this is peculiar to them. So of those who asserted that the universe was one non-managed So of those who asserted that the universe was one none managed to see such a cause except perhaps Parmenides, Parmenides, and he did so only insofar as he supposed that there was not only one, but in a way also two causes. Those, however, who said that there were many principles had greater ease in stating it, such as those who said that there was hot and cold, or fire and earth, and for they used fire as having a kinetic nature, the opposite of earth and water, and such like things. After these thinkers and principles like these, as they were not sufficient to generate the nature of entities, once again, by the truth itself, as we have said, they were obligated to seek out the next principle. For of the fact that some entities have in some entities are the good and noble, perhaps neither fire nor earth, nor any of such things is either likely. This guy is hard to read sometimes. Let me restart. For of the fact that some entities have and some entities are the good and noble, perhaps neither fire nor earth nor any such things is either likely to be the cause, nor did they think that it was, nor indeed would it be good to hand so great a responsibility over to chance and the automatic. Now one of them said that mind was present in the universe as in the animals, and that this was the cause of order in nature and the whole arrangement, making the earlier thinkers look absurd. We clearly know then that Anaxagoras embraced this account, but that it was Hermotimus of Clazomenae, Clazomenae, who earlier gave it to this cause. Those then who made this supposition said that the cause of nobility was a principle of entities, and also a cause of the kind from which change comes to entities. I fucking love entities. All of y'all are entities listening, as are the trees. Though a rock is not, a rock is a species. Aristotle continues his critical survey of the history of philosophy before Plato, in which philosophers felt obscurely the need to go beyond explanation of the world in purely material terms, but were unable to come up with any very satisfactory accounts of either movement or purpose. Anaxagoras, as already said, and Empedocles came closest to understanding the need for an explanation in terms of purpose, but their explanations were schematic, metaphorical, self-contradictory, or in various other ways unsatisfactory. The approach of the atomists, my friends, was even less complete. Not anymore. We got that in the bag. That's why we're in this mess today, ladies and gentlemen. They had difficulty even in accounting for movement and had nothing at all to say about purpose. We still don't care about purpose. Movement we got down. Aristotle clearly feels that the value of studying these earlier schools in that one acquires a vivid realization of the poverty of their explanatory assumptions. This will justify the much broader conception of science and philosophy that we have to offer. Anyhow, one might suppose that Hesiod was the first to seek for such a thing, or anyone else who placed love and desire among the entities as their principle. Or anyone else who placed love and desire among the entities of their principle. Even love and desire can be an entity, because they do have their own actions. Again, a rock has no action. It is a species. As also did Parmenides, Parmenides. For he too is describing the creation of the universe, first says, and he devised love for all the gods. While Hesiod says, foremost of all was chaos, and then next, broad-fronted earth, and love, who ministers to every god, on the assumption that among entities there must be some cause which moves and combines things. One ought then, in a way, to decide among them for who was first. But is it possible to judge later also? But since the opposites of good things are also obviously present in nature, there is not only arrangement and nobility, but also disorder and ugliness. 98.5a. And the bad things are more numerous than the good, and the base than the fine. Accordingly, another philosopher introduced love and strife, each being the cause of each of these groups. For if one were to attend carefully and take in their sense, and not on the face of the cryptic remarks of Empedocles, one will find that love is the cause of good things and strife of bad things. And so if one were to say that in a way Empedocles both gave and was the first to give evil and good as principles, perhaps one would put it rightly, if indeed the same good itself is the cause of all good things. These thinkers then were, as we have said, and so far, there being two causes of which we have defined in the physics, they seem to have a glimpse of them, that of matter and that from which the motion comes indistinctively through. And in no way very clearly. None of this is very clear to a first-time reader, I promise. I'm not a first-time reader, and I still struggle. But in the way that unarmed soldiers do in battle, but unarmed soldier is useless in battle. Metaphysics is useless. Aristotle tells us that himself. For indeed, they in Peregrinations often strike good blows, but they do not do so from knowledge. And no more do these thinkers seem to have been known what they were saying, for they seem to have made more or less no use of these principles except to a small extent. And for Anaxagoras uses the mind as a device for the making of the cosmos, and when he puzzles for what reason it is of necessity, then he drags in mind. But in other matters he ascribes cause to anything else rather than to mind, and Empedocles makes even more use than he of the causes, but still insufficiently, nor does he find in these what is agreed. For often indeed for him love divides and strife combines. Love divides and strife combines. You know, there's really not enough love in the world to bring unity. Oddly enough, hate and struggle will unify people more than anything. For when the universe is reduced by strife to its elements, fire and each of the other elements is reduced to a single thing. But whenever again through love they are brought to a single thing, it is necessary that the parts of each thing are again dissolved. Empedocles, then, among earlier thinkers, was the first to distinguish and introduce this cause, not making the principle of change single, but different and opposite. And he was also the first to make the elements said in the form of matter 4. The elements said in the form of matter 4. There's 4 forms of matter. He did not indeed treat them as 4, but being 2 only. 98.5b. Fire in itself and the opposites as a single nature, earth, air, and water. One can understand this by considering his words. He then, as we say, in this way gave the number of causes. In this way gave this number of causes. Leucippus, Leucippus, however, and his companion Democritus said that elements were the full and the empty, and that of these the full and the solid were what is, and the empty was what is not. Accordingly, he denies that what is exists any more than what is not, any more than the void exists more than the body. And he says that these things are the causes of entities and matter. And just as those who make the underlying substance one produce other things by affections of it, positing that the rare and the dense are the principles of the affections, in the same way these thinkers too say that there are differences, that the differences are the causes of the other things. And they say that these are 3, shape, order, and position. For they say that what is differs in shape, place, and manner only. Shape, place, and manner only. Absolute position is what that is today. And of these, shape is shape. Location is arrangement, and manner is position. So, things have a shape, they have a position, and they have a location. That is the earliest definition of absolute position. For instance, A differs from N in shape, and from AN from NA in arrangement, and Z from N in position. Because if you roll Z on its side, it becomes an N. So it has a different position. Same uniformity. You just change your perspective and its position. As regards change, then, whence and in what way entities have it, these thinkers too, like the others, spoke loosely. So about the first 2 causes, as we say, the earlier thinkers seem to have got so far in their inquiry. I know a lot of that doesn't make sense. That's okay. We're primarily just going to brute force our way through this book as best we can, and then I will come back after it is all read through and give a better explanation in a slower tone. But like I said, these are just attempts to brute force metaphysics because we have a lot of ground to cover. A lot of ground to cover. Anyhow, that's Aristotle's Metaphysics, Book Alpha 3 and 4. I can't ever work my stop.